We live in a society where there is greater representation of women in parliament in Rwanda and in Afghanistan and in Iraq than in Britain.
Women in Northern Ireland cannot access an abortion legally or freely.
We've waited too long for equal pay.
3 million women suffer violence every year, where nearly half of all women in this country will experience it in some form in their lifetime. There is still a long, long way to go for gender equality in this country.
Women's organisations are crucial to advancing women's equality.
There are so many brilliant women's projects out there.
Women's organisations cover violence against women, health, employment, education, rights and equality, criminal injustice and the environment.
They achieve incredible outcomes on a daily basis.
The funding situation for women's organisation in the UK, which is quite dire and problematic.
Women are choosing to access rape crisis centres and we can't provide the amount of provision that women want.
Too many women's organisations are still fighting to get the bread that's necessary for survival.
The fourth Why Women report, not just bread but roses too. Research establishes a baseline for measuring the diversity and the financial sustainability of the women's voluntary and community sector.
Only 1.2% of government funding goes to the 7% of charities that are run by women.
Only 1% of all women's organisations focus on lesbian, bisexual and trans women.
A large proportion of women's organisations are closing presently.
We've been lobbying government for adequate funding for rape crisis centres, particularly sustainable funding, for what seems like eternity.
We must know about CEDAW.
To be able to learn about CEDAW and make the most of CEDAW is really important.
CEDAW is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women.
The CEDAW Convention is about ensuring that women will enjoy all those rights and freedoms on the equal footing with men and on the basis of equality with men.
CEDAW is legally binding for our government.
The convention, I think, particularly in the UK, shifts the emphasis from issues being seen as women's issues and women's problems and needs to entitlement.
But the whole thing about CEDAW didn't really make any sense to me until I actually went to New York and saw the committee happen.
The basic structure of the reporting process includes several steps. First step at the national level is preparation of the report and submission to CEDAW committee.
The UK had not reported on its progress against CEDAW for 9 years, so last year was a very significant milestone.
NGOs feed into the examination of the UK government by the submission of shadow reports to the committee.
Our job is to present evidence about what's actually happening from our perspective.
Then we have examination of the report before the CEDAW committee.
We sent a very small party to the UN, which was headed up by our then Deputy Minister for Women, Barbara Follett. It was a 6-hour examination and we fielded 102 questions.
Watching your government overclaim, not really engage with the committee, was a really uncomfortable experience.
After that examination, we have adoption of concluding observations.
When the observations, the concluding observations did come out, I was very pleasantly surprised. I think it was very sharp. It did address a lot of the subtleties of the issues that we're facing in Western European countries.
What was so fantastic about going to CEDAW last time, that actually the groups that went were not these higher level professional women's organisations. They were actually Southall Black Sisters, South Essex Rape and Incest Crisis Centres.
Next stage, what is follow-up to concluding observations or implementation of concluding observations at the national level.
In January and February this year, our ministers wrote to every other government department and their ministers, drawing out each recommendation from CEDAW that was appropriate to their department.
The CEDAW committee did place a requirement on the UK government to report within 1 year on some of the issues. So that report will be due to the committee in July.
This summer, what we will be doing is in Whitehall, we'll be organising a conference with other government departments to review CEDAW conclusions and to make sure that we're making progress on them.
We certainly would like to be working towards 2011 when more of us can go and experience it.
Unless the women's sector push things that the government is meant to be doing, then often they won't really get to achieve what they might.
It's a useful tool.
The convention is only as good as we make it.
I feel like we have a lot of opportunity and energy to really push CEDAW through. It is a tool.
In the future, we must use CEDAW in legal arguments and in legal cases in order to make sure that the government is forced to comply with it.
The role of non-governmental organizations is something that is very specific and crucial for implementation of CEDAW Convention.
It needs women's organisations to illustrate how that can work, but also where things aren't working, so that the enforcement tools which are there ultimately can be used.
We're coming up to an election. Labour and Conservatives are potentially fighting for who are the best. Well, you know, let's use this time and lobby sort of central government and our MPs on CEDAW.
We have to give the committee good, useful, concrete information. We have to give them statistics, we have to give them evidence, and we have to give them ideas about what we think would work for the future and about what we would like to see in those concluding observations. And I think we need to be thinking about that now for the next time already.
We're not asking for something. We're actually saying, no, we have the right to this. So I want us to use the human rights voice in our own work.
We must know about everything that's at our disposal. Once you have all these tools, you can start linking up to other organisations that focus on those tools. So what you would hopefully see is a kind of a solidarity of women's organisations and human rights organisations coming together.